Joe Rogan and James Fox expose the secret deep-sea underworld where UFOs roam like phantoms. Silent, frictionless, and centuries ahead of human tech. Is there an alien empire lurking beneath the waves? Or is this a massive psyop to hide the military's next-gen arsenal?
And he hints that he knows a guy who might be going to work out at Area 51 and knows something about alien technology. That guy turns out to be Bob Lazar, but Lear didn't give me the name at that time. A couple months later, I am anchoring the 5 o'clock news on KLAS, and we have a nightly or evening interview segment, 5-minute segment, live interview. Our guest doesn't show up. And we're scrambling to find somebody to fill that hole. And I thought about Lear. So I called him up, not knowing what had been going on in Lazar's life or Lear's life. And I said, hey, is your that UFO guy you told me about, is he around? Would he do an interview? Just turned out that Bob had been through the ringer. A lot of stuff going on in his life. He felt threatened. And he said yes. We had to block out his face. We do this interview, and he spills the basics of the story. I worked out there at a place called S4. I saw 9 flying saucers in an underground base. This is technology that came from somewhere else. I'm in fear for my life. Holy cow, the phones start ringing off the hook. My news director comes rushing in, the station manager, is that for real? What's the deal on that? And we realized we had touched the pulse of the public in a way that I didn't really understand. We arranged to go meet Bob Lazar, my news director, Bob Stodall, and I, that following weekend, and put him through a paces where we would ask him questions about his background and how he got the job. We spent a couple hours with him, and we walked out of that meeting thinking, holy shit, what if this is true? This is really risky for us as journalists. It's risky for our personal reputations if it blows up in our faces and we do this story, and it would really damage the reputation of our news organization, which is KLAS is a jewel. It's always been a leader in Las Vegas, one of the best TV news operations in the country. We're putting a lot on the line. Well, look, we decide, let's take our time. Let's look into this guy's story. And then in order to understand Lazar, we'd have to look at the bigger picture of UFOs. So I started a cram course on ufology, and I read everything. And I spent 8 months like cramming for a final exam that never happened. I read everything. I interviewed people. That same year, MUFON had its international symposium in Las Vegas, and there all the world's UFO people came right to me. I got to interview them, traveled around, went to Los Alamos. Lazar took us into the lab. We took cameras in there. He walked us around, waving to people. We didn't even have to stop for security. Took us into the lab like it was a rabbit going through its own burrow. He knew his way around. We were allowed to take a camera in there. We put those stories together, put them on the air in November, and man, it just went through the roof. Every night of this 9-part series, people got the audience got bigger, phones ringing off the hook, people calling, giving us information. Suddenly, it's on something called Paranet, which was sort of a precursor to the internet, and it was huge. And it changed my life for sure. I had no idea that there were so many people out there interested in the topic, and I was hooked. And I really got hooked on Lazar not only because his story. Personally, I was interested in him. We became friends. I saw what happened to him after that live interview, and in the 7.5 months before we went and I revealed his identity, people were really messing with him. I mean, you cannot convey what it was like, how weird it was then, breaking into his house, leaving the windows open, messing with things in his home, breaking into his car, leaving the doors and windows down, just messing with his head.
And you think that was the guy who was doing that?
Yeah, I do. I think. And then, so I had put out a call to people, hey, I want other people to come forward.
This was before his identity was revealed. Yeah, we should explain this.
Actively seeking information from the public. If you ever worked at Area 51 or S4, you know anything about this, you're at Nellis Air Force Base, reach out to me. So I started getting calls, and 6 people right in a row who had talked to me on the phone and offered to give me information were visited right after the call. One of them was a guy who did tax returns for people at Nellis Air Force Base, and he had got to know these guys really well and got information about crashes. There was a guy who was a golf pro at Nellis who had gone on out road trips with officers and told him about this weird stuff out at Area 51 that seemed to be from somewhere else. He gets visited and told to shut up. There was a lady who worked in the court system. A cop told me about her. And I talked to her on the phone, and she had worked at the court system, but before She had worked for a company called Holmes and Narber, which is a defense contractor. And she said she sat in as a stenographer in these meetings and heard these conversations between the government contractors and Air Force officials about crashed saucers. And they would, after the meeting, they take the tape out of the typewriter and destroy it and take all the notes. And she agreed to tell me this story. It was just a tiny piece of the story. The next day, she's visited by these two guys in suits. They tell her, look, you are still subject to your security clearance. I hope you know that. And then they said, we know you traveled to L.A. to see your daughter, and we know she comes here. It's a big desert out there. It'd be terrible if something happened to either one of you. This lady is scared shitless. She didn't make that stuff up. So 6 people who had offered to give me information on the phone, one right after another, get visited, and it made me mad. It also made me mad that dealing with, trying to fill in pieces of Bob Lazar's life. Now, I know there's some gaping holes. I know it better than anybody. I've had to deal with it for 31 years. But I always thought if he worked at Los Alamos in classified projects in a scientific or technical capacity, then it would make sense that he could get hired into a program like S4 as somebody who thinks outside the box. Despite personal shortcomings or whatever, they might bring somebody like him in to help them crack a problem that they hadn't been able to resolve themselves. So I focused on Los Alamos. I knew he had been there. I talked to people who remembered him from being there, but the lab kept telling me, no record of him. He's never here. And then I showed him, well, look, I've got the Los Alamos newspaper. It's a small town paper. There it is on the front page, a front page story. Bob Lazar, physicist, Mason facility, Los Alamos lab. It's a story about his jet car. Nope, still have no records of him. And then I found his name in the phone book from the era when he was there. He's in the lab phone book. He had been hired by a company called Kirkmeyer, which is a company that's a headhunter that fills positions at Los Alamos and places like that. So great, I'll reach out to Kirkmeyer. They said, yeah, we hired him. Yeah, we've got records. Can I get it? Can I get his employment records that would show where he went to school, whatever information you guys had? Yes. A couple weeks go by, nothing. Couple more weeks go by, I call him again, I start writing them. I've got a stack of letters that thick. It went on for 2.5 years, and finally, by the end of it, they said he was never here. We don't have any records. That pissed me off. It made me mad, and I think that is really what got me hooked in the story, is that being jacked around by government and national facilities like that.
We should explain the Los Alamos thing, because the Los Alamos thing coincided with him doing work at MIT, right? Is that correct?
He's explained it to me. Yeah.
The way he explained it to me, I don't think I'm at liberty to say what the project was, because the project, the way he was describing it, is essentially internationally illegal, like what they were working on. And that's one of the reasons why he was saying, he explained what the project was. It sounded very feasible, also very evil. And then it was basically a weapon. And then he said that this is the reason why there was no actual record of him studying at MIT. It wasn't important that he got a degree. It was important that he understand the technical specifications of what they were attempting to accomplish.
My understanding as well. Yeah. And, it's always been the most problematic part of his background. And it's where a lot of people in the Bob Lazar story, that's where they stop.
But the thing is, when you listen to him talk and when he describes things, it's very clear he's educated.
Oh, he's a brilliant guy. But I had always told him, and Bob, you're my friend. I want to have a conversation with you about these claimed degrees, because I didn't believe that he'd ever sat down. In those days, you go to a college like MIT or Caltech and get a degree. You've got to take classes in something other than science. I could not imagine Bob Lazar taking an English lit class to save his life. But he is a brilliant guy. I'll give you an example. In April, COVID thing is raging. My wife and I are staying at home. We're getting packages delivered for food and things of that sort. I'm a little worried. They didn't know about contact, whether you can get it off of cardboard boxes or whatever. And I mentioned to Bob in a phone conversation, I'm thinking about buying one of these UV screener systems. He goes, wait a second. Don't buy one. I think I've got the parts that I can make you one in my garage. And a week later, it arrives. This thing, he's got it in his garage, handmade, this big scanner with these UV things that works. He just whipped it up in his garage.
I'll remind you, you got the scanner. I got a laser gun.
Right.
You got a laser gun?
I did, man. It is super powerful. So it's like a handheld toy that he retrofitted with a superpower. So I'm like lighting shit on fire in my house. And
So it looked a handheld toy, but it's actually a real laser?
Toy with full noise, but he put a diode in there, and it's super powerful. Like it can light shit on fire. My wife hates that shit. So I got the laser gun.
You also got the flamethrower, though. Lazar made a flamethrower. This is before your buddy Elon made flamethrowers.
No comment on that.
Yeah, well,
it's a massive
He made one. He made a flamethrower.
Obviously a very intelligent man.
Yeah.
When you listen to him talk, there's no bullshitting going on. When he talks about talks about undeniable, concrete things, when it comes to science, when it comes to elements, when it comes to propulsion systems, he clearly knows what he's talking about. And the really confusing thing for people that are detractors is he really hasn't changed his story in 31 years. It really is the same story. And that's really hard to do. Even if you tell a true story, 31 years later, you get it screwed up a little bit. It's hard.
A pristine craft, doors wide open, and nobody home. Is this a gift from the stars or a massive government psyop? The truth is lurking beneath the waves.
By the way, for coming forward and sharing that information with Mayor Vers. Mayor Vers helped us find. It was really funny. We were interviewing with him, and I was like, "Is this guy say what is he going to say? He's a sitting mayor."
Right.
And he's like, "I got to tell you, man. I know a lot of the witnesses. I got to say, I think this thing happened. I really do." He goes, "If there's anything I can do to help out, you let me know." I was like, "Pull out your Rolodex. I want you to help me find Eric Lopes." Eric Lopes is the key. He's the only living survivor of this capture. He was a driver of Marco Cerisi, right? The family of the deceased military officer, Marta, her mother, could not get statements from Eric. She said every time they'd pressure him, he'd be smoking cigarettes and keen and getting really nervous and just wouldn't say anything. She wanted me after it. She was like, "We want a statement from Eric Lopes so badly. He's the only, person witness." So I said to the mayor, I was like, "Yeah, if you really want to offer some help me find Eric Lopes." So he's like, "No problem." So he does. So then we meet in the town square with it was like a former chief of police or chief guy, and his son Homolo, who's a lawyer and was a prominent politician. And he goes, "I'll take you out there to his house. Then you guys are on." So I was like, "All right." So this little voice, as we're all in our cars and driving off to go see this guy, this little voice in my head, maybe I should walk up the door with me. So I jumped out of my car and I flew in the Mercedes, that black Mercedes that we followed. And I told the translator, "Hey, is there any chance you'd consider just walking up the door with me?" I honestly think that had I not done that, he might have opened fire on me immediately. Because who's this gringo guy walked to his door on his property asking questions about something he does not want to talk about? And when we got up to the door, I remember I heard talking as we walked up, and it was a pretty intense moment because I'd heard about this guy for years, but nobody could find him. He wouldn't talk to anybody. Got up to the door, and there was a handful of us, cameras rolling, and I hear voices. I hear talking, but I can't see anybody. I'm like, where is this guy? Who are they talking to? And I realized he was up in the window looking down at us. He had his arms on the window. He's looking out the window. And he's talking to Homolo, and he's talking to the other translator. And I'm looking at this guy's face. And I saw a face. This does not translate in the film. I saw a face that I've never seen before. It was a face, Joe, that was harboring a deep, burdened with some so disturbing and profound that I just got lost looking at this guy's eyes. I was like, "Oh my God, I've never seen a face like this before." And he's looking out there, and the whole time threatening to shoot everybody, and I didn't know what he was saying. And the translators weren't telling me. He said it 3 times. "You don't get out. Bullets are going to start flying." Like he's military guy, like he's armed to the teeth. But I was looking at the guy's face, and I'm looking at Dave, the DP, Dave West, and I'm hoping that he's getting this guy's face. But Dave had a long lens, and the guy was looking at my DP, and he was going like this. Dave said he's never been more intimidated trying to film someone in his life. And he was like this, and he had one hand under here like that. And he kept doing that to the camera guy. And Dave said he was trying to zoom in on the face, and it was going blurry, and he couldn't, it was very intense. And then Homolo looks over at me, terminato. He doesn't speak English, and I don't speak Portuguese. I know very little. But that he gave me, that was like international. Like that look he gave me was, "Get the hell out of here right now. Right now." He's like, I'll tell you later kind of thing. And then we left. And I asked him, I was like, was he serious? Like that guy? Look, all he had to do was come outside and be like, guys. And the first thing he says, all we say is, Eric Lopes. Eric's not going to talk about the ET. That was the first thing out of his mouth. Like, why would you say that? It's like the police showing up at your house and you opening the door going, "There are no drugs here." It's like, well, I didn't ask that. But now that you mention, okay, I guess you guys have drugs. And he's like, I can't tell you. Eric Lopes could have just come outside and said, "Oh, this is a huge misunderstanding. Nothing happened. I'm so sorry that, my name got dragged. This story, there's nothing to it." That's all he had to do, and it's over, right? Do that. He just threatened to kill everybody and said, "I'm not talking about the ET." So that's very telling about what happened. And they just named a street Marco Cerisi 3 days ago. So it's an ongoing story. It's a fascinating story. And I'm going to have a hat on this that if I have the right help, and we're all in this together, if they have compelling eyewitness testimony to make one think, this very well might have happened, doesn't that merit further investigation? Doesn't that merit further efforts to solve this riddle once and for all? This debate's been going on for 80 years. I'm handing this case to the world on a silver platter and saying, help me, let's get this one done.
Imagine if some of that autopsy photos got out, some video.
Well, I'm talking to the doctor. I can tell you right now that the doctors all talk to each other. There were doctors that shot video of that creature. I guarantee it. I know that for a fact.
And no one can that video. No one stopped them from doing that. No one.
Apparently, the doctors were
confiscated it?
left alone for a while with this thing. And here's something that I really want to put out there. Hopefully, this gets translated into Portuguese, and the people of Brazil will hear this. The doctors that were written about in Dr. Roger Lear's book, one of my biggest regrets. I was filming in Los Angeles, 2013. I was covering the Zimbabwe case, and I had flown in all these witnesses with the help of this guy, Randall Nickerson. I'd flown on all these witnesses to the landing case that happened in Africa as adults. And I was doing this really intense shoot down there. I had Kim Arnold, the daughter of Kenneth Arnold. So when Paula Harrison locked that was a nightmare trying to get her on camera. And I just had so much going on. And meanwhile, I'm getting phone calls from this guy, Roger Lear, and he's going, "I understand you're investigating Varginha. You got to get on camera. You got to get me on camera." And I kept saying, "I will. I'll try." And I ended up, he got really upset with me. And he's like, "Well, if you're not going to get me on camera," I said, "It's not that I get you on camera, Roger. I said, I'm so busy right now." He goes, "Well, what he didn't tell me was I've got cancer and I'm dying. And please get me on camera because there's aspects of the story that you need to know that I know." Anyway, he died. He gives me these tapes and then he dies. I sent the tapes back to him, and then he died. And I got his book, reading his book when I'm putting the film together. And in the book, it's basically a transcription of all the tapes that I have. I could see that because I have tapes. And he's got a professional translator, and he's got this guy, Ubara Rodriguez, going around the countryside with him and introducing him to all these witnesses. And it's all on camera, except the meeting with, according to his book, that took place in the Humanitas Hospital with tutors. I couldn't validate this, and I didn't put it in the movie. There's two doctors who are listening to this. Apparently, the creature was alive. The one that Marco Cerisi brought into Humanitas Hospital was alive. And according to Dr. Roger Lear's book, everything else was accurate. I can't say if this was accurate or not, but he put it in his book, so I mean that it is. And Uba Dejara won't talk about it. He's a witness. There were tutors that claimed telepathic communication with the live entity. That's in his book. Now, I'm not telling your audience that that's true. I'm telling you that it might be true. We know that that entity, that creature, that being, that ET, whatever you want to call it, went to Humanitas Hospital. We know that because we have testimony from the people that took it there. We have testimony from the people on the inside that claimed it was there. But we don't have any testimony from the doctors that claimed there was a telepathic communication.
Do they talk at all? But it said
that they felt sorry for the human species, not realizing their potential of really who they really are. Like they're not. We don't realize as a race who we really are. That's what they said. It's in his. So anyway,
what did they mean by that?
That we don't recognize. I mean, I'm not sure. I guess that we don't recognize the potential that we have as human beings, who we really are. I'm not sure. what they meant exactly, more than that. But if Ubadajada Rodriguez is listening to this, please come forward and tell me who those doctors are. If the doctors are listening to this, they're still alive. What does it take? What will it take to get you to come forward? Anything. Just tell me what it takes. And I can tell people to contact me at my Twitter. I guess that's the way to tell them, right? At James C. Fox. Is that?
Yeah.
Would that be the best way to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm not going to give up my email.
Don't give.
I'm not going to do that. But
let her sort it out.
I want people to know about this case.
If these objects are coming from the ocean, the scale of the operation is staggering. Logistically, you would need a massive infrastructure beneath the waves. The declassified ATIP and AATIP files, 2007, 2012, confirmed videos like ****, gimbal, ****, and ****, go fast, ****, showing objects that move with zero drag and no visible means of propulsion. These ghosts don't just fly, they dive. They inhabit the parts of our planet we have yet to map.
In
Can you
47.
explain that?
Well, so Ken Arnold was a pilot, and
That's in that movie Phenomenon, right? Isn't it described in that?
maybe so.
The Phenomenon?
Maybe so.
Okay.
And so he was flying over Mount Shasta or somewhere in Washington there, and saw these objects, 9 objects, kind of skipping along in formation. And he, being a professional pilot, was able to estimate their speed, calculate that, and they were traveling way too fast for conventional aircraft. And the shape that he described was, I've always thought of them a little bit of a manta ray shape without the tail, kind of a little bit of a curved boomerang kind of shape to the craft. And that that got an awful lot of attention because he was a very credible fellow, as were other people that later revealed their own sightings, military backgrounds, people that had major rank or captain rank, so they had stories you would listen to, about their experiences because they were professional observers in the military, and
actually, while we were out eating dinner last night, Dan Crenshaw sent me a text, and I shared it with everybody at the table, and it's from American Airlines pilots that saw some spectacular sighting over the last couple of days.
Right.
And they're, trying to figure out what the hell these people saw, but something that sped by them at some insane rates of speed, and there's a recording of them discussing it.
Whether it's abnormal or intentional, that should never have happened in that proximity to that aircraft, right? So if it were an accident, that's a really bad accident to come that close. And if it were flying in the line of flight and it sped that fast over its head, it was really moving.
Yeah, well, it was a conventional commercial aircraft go. American Airlines pilot reports seeing UFO. An American Airlines pilot reported seeing a long cylindrical object flying right over the top of the plane as he was flying. Sunday's American Airlines flight AA2292 was operating from Cincinnati to Phoenix using an Airbus A320 aircraft over the northeast portion of New Mexico at 37,000 feet during what was otherwise a routine flight. One of the pilots contacted air traffic control at Albuquerque Center. He said, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over the top of us. I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast right over the top of us."
So what's propulsion signature, right? So that should have been evident that it had some kind of propulsion.
That you could see the
Exhaust.
burners.
Some kind of exhaust was going on, right?
Yeah.
You would think that they could detect that if it were in the line of sight, if they were behind it.
Well, that's a very short, though. I mean, maybe it did have some sort of propulsion that they saw.
Yeah.
That's all we saw. I mean, maybe there's a report that'll come out where they describe it in detail. That's just them calling it in, right?
Yeah, if it's super unique, then it was one hell of a mistake, right?
Yeah, I mean,
So.
it's just, there's a lot of those. That's the problem. There's a lot of these, and there's video of them, like the one, what is it? The one that's on the East Coast that's moving over the surface of the water at insane rates of speed. And you see it, and it also no heat signature, no obvious method of propulsion, and it doesn't exhibit, because that one was done, I believe it was infrared, the camera. So like, you should have been able to see some exhaust or some heat signature that was showing how it was being propelled at that insane rates of speed. And, and you hear these pilots who are used to flying, they're flying fighter jets, and they're like, holy shit, look at this thing. Yeah. And they're kind of freaking out.
Well, the news is there are so many more people with cameras and with cell phones these days, and so you have a much more aware public than you did 25 years ago. In 1997 was the so-called Phoenix lights.
Yeah.
And they weren't just lights, because that craft started from northern Arizona, some say maybe Clark County, Nevada area, and proceeded down south toward Phoenix in the twilight of the evening, where thousands of people saw structure. It wasn't just lights. It wasn't just, could it be confused with flares, aircraft dropping flares, and no such things had occurred anyway at that time of that day. And so people saw structure, and the structure was estimated, quarter mile maybe from tip to tip, boomerang kind of shape, kind of craft. And yet that should have been a really big deal news-wise. Right over a major city, so many observers, but it wasn't. And then you had...
But it was, though, right? Because we all know it.
Well, but then, of course, the governor at the time was Fife Symington, and we know now that he didn't know what to do because he was an actual witness that he admitted to 10 years later of actually being a witness.
Right.
But he didn't know how to address that.
Well, that was the famous press conference.
It was a famous press conference.
He had to dress up like an alien and made a
on
mockery
stage,
of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If he had done just the opposite, what might have happened on that with his testimony as being a witness, a governor of a state, and then other people then might have come forth more and more volume of folks saying, yeah, me too, I saw it.
With your understanding of the way the government sort of processes this kind of information, that it's not available to everybody. And the information in terms of like what these things are, what they aren't, whether or not they're some sort of top secret aircraft that the government is working on, or whatever it is, they don't, unless they're making press conferences about these things, they don't necessarily want to broadcast what it is, and they certainly don't want to broadcast it if it's not one of ours. Do you think that they contacted the governor and informed him that he needed to make a mockery of this, or do you think it was his own personal decision?
My feeling is it was his personal decision. And my feeling is that the government is not that organized anymore. Maybe it was back quite a while back, but I don't think that. I think that denial is able to be carried forth without government encouragement.
So he probably just to calm everybody down.
Yeah.
I mean, he probably felt tremendous pressure, right? Because I remember this was an enormous story. I mean, it was going all across the United States as people were talking about it, and then there was all sorts of sort of semi-reasonable explanations about dropping flares. The thing about the dropping flares, though, were that they hovered in the sky for a long time. Like, it didn't make any sense that are they defying gravity? How are they just, because there's video footage of it from multiple sources, home footage where people are filming these things, where these red lights that are just hovering in the sky. But the red lights coincided with these triangular-shaped vehicles or boomerang-shaped vehicles that other people were seeing.
Well, there were people on Camelback Mountain, and this is how low this craft was to the surface, as they got a edge-on view, coming practically at them, just slightly went over the mountain.
But there's no video of that, right?
I don't know. There could be. I've never seen.
And this
that.
was 97.
97. Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's phones back then. Not everybody had a phone, and they didn't have good cameras.
Right.
The thing about even today, with cameras, and most cell phone cameras aren't capable of seeing things at a zoom, with the exception of the Samsung Galaxy series, the new ones. They actually have a setting where you can take photographs of the moon because they have some pretty spectacular zoom capabilities. It's pretty interesting stuff. And if you got one of those and you saw something in the sky, maybe you could zoom in on it
Right.
and get a good shot of it. But, you're talking about things traveling at insane rates of speed. It's very far away.
Yeah.
You're really not going to get much anyway.
No. It's got to be closer to really have definition
Yeah.
of what it is you're looking at.
Now, there was a story quite recently of a pilot in a fighter jet that took a photograph of some similar shaped object, some triangular shaped object, and apparently it was very, very clear image. It was a very clear image, and there was some speculation about people releasing this and that they were going to release it, and there was hesitation about releasing it. Do you know about this?
Well, the one off the East Coast,
Real recently.
no, I'm not familiar with that.
There was what I'm talking about, Jamie. I think we discussed it with
The picture that you can see, they zoomed in on
the picture. Apparently is bullshit.
Okay.
That picture apparently is not real. But
But there was one by a pilot in a plane
yeah, but
a couple, 2-3 years ago, sometime.
a different one.
Is that that?
See, this
Yeah,
is the
he took it out
Pentagon
of the
response
canopy.
release a photo taken from Navy pilot showing unidentified objects. See, I had heard that this was nuts.
kinda
I heard from people that are in the know that
Well-
this is not the image that they're talking about. The one they have, this is according to people that are in the military. The one they have is much than
Yeah,
this.
there's more than one image.
I don't know.
We may be talking about different ones.
Maybe. I don't know. Okay, breaking. Breaking. Debrief Media has learned the leak of classified photos said to have been widely distributed in the intelligence community, which purportedly shows what the DoD has characterized as unidentified aerial phenomenon. I don't know if that's look. Obviously, I'm just talking out of my ass, but what I had heard was that was not the image in question. That there was a much clearer image in question that was pretty stunning. That they were debating on whether or not to release, because once the New York Times in 2017 published that front page article that showed some of those images that had been captured from the video cameras and that fighter jets experiences and talked about Commander David Fravor's experience with the Tic Tac UFO off the coast of San Diego. That sort of like released a lot of pressure on the concept of if you discuss these things, you're a foolish person, right? For a long time, and I'm sure
Joe Rogan and James Fox just pulled back the curtain on a reality that makes science fiction look like a bedtime story. We aren't talking about lights in the sky anymore. We're talking about the oceanic underworld, a realm where UFOs operate like ghosts.
burden is on you as a scientist to come up with an experiment that will discriminate between the random things,
Right.
and will give you guides to,
Well, that's what they've done with the telepathy tapes, and I'm hoping the success of this, and then they're going to do a whole series on it, where they're doing a documentary and they're showing all the footage, so you're going to be able to see it for yourself. And I'm hoping that this stops the ridicule, because there's a bunch of scientists and I think this is with the UAP topic as well, the UFO topic as well. I think there's a bunch of people that don't want to consider it because there's too much bullshit out there, and there's too much of a possibility that you could look like a fool. And to a very respected scientist whose research is very important, as you were talking about with the IBM thing, where there's hundreds of millions of dollars that are dedicated towards these, why would you risk all that and the credibility of all that on this nonsense about people seeing things with their brain in a closed room, finding coordinates, pretending they're on top of a mountain, all that kind of stuff?
well, fortunately, certainly in California, there are people who can take risk, and put a few dollars behind something.
Shatterford.
Yep.
Yeah.
I come from France, and in France, it's very, very hard to do that, because the system is very structured and very conventional and so on.
Right.
Even though France has had some of the brightest people in that kind of research.
Just a cultural limitation of the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, sort of everything has to be rational. Because,
Yeah. A little more chaotic.
and also, as you know, France has had, for a long time, a project on UFOs, an official project, and that takes reports from the public, and they investigate them, and it's a very small team, but they have access to all the resources of French research. So they can, they get the weather people, they can get the Air Force, they can get the radar people, they can get all of that. So they can tap into the resources of a lot of different departments of the government. So it's very powerful. So they find a rational explanation for about 95% of all the reports, which is true. I agree with that. I've been there.
So it's about 95% you can explain away.
It's hoaxes. Those are, people who really think that they've seen something unusual.
Right.
But what was unusual to them may have been the moon rising through the fog, and it looks like an elongated disc, and then after a while things change and so on. And
ball lightning. There's a
they really think they've seen a flying saucer coming over, or there are about 200 or 250 possible physical things that could surprise you, that are unusual, that would create conditions under which a normal person would think that they are in the presence of a UFO. Then, what's interesting is the other 5%.
Yes.
The other 5% is in your face. I have reports of something that moved like the Tic Tac, from the French Air Force in the 50s. There was a French jet over Morocco that was, and there was a radar tracking the jet. And I had the reports from the French Air Force with the chart. And that the thing he was chasing went up, all in the fraction of a second, went to the top of the atmosphere, just like the Nimitz case. So those things are not new. I mean, they are in the files if you take the trouble to look at the files.
And they're in the files far back enough in history that it's impossible to imagine human technology achieving these things.
Absolutely. Well, especially in the 50s. I mean,
right. Well, the Kendall
anything
case
that had gone into space.
Yeah, there's a bunch of cases that rule out the possibility of human technology when you're talking about people using propeller planes and seeing these things. We were at a time technologically where it's not possible to imagine that someone had gone that far beyond us. Now we are in that time where you see things, you go, well, how much of that is some sort of top secret government program, some military program, and they have drones that can move at extraordinary speeds with some undisclosed propulsion system. That's possible today, at least theoretically. We entertain those ideas. But back then, this is one of the most fascinating things. I told you last night that I consumed 3 of your books in the last 6 months. And there was this series of 3 that you did that had a bunch of different encounters. Not just, right now I'm on the Invisible College, but the last ones that I read were the ones on various contacts that people have had and the similarity of these stories. And they go way back before it was sort of a cultural artifact. Like right now, I think in people's minds, the gray aliens are so iconic. A flying saucer like that. That's a copy of the Bort model from Bob Lazar's Adventures. These things are in pop culture to the point where you almost would expect to see them. You look for them. If you see something, you could imagine that you could twist it up in your mind and make it like that. But the problem is these stories go way before that. They're too similar. They go a long, long way back, and there's too many that are very, very similar to what we're talking about today, to the point where a rational person would have to say, maybe there's something more to this. What do you got there?
Yeah, I brought you this. It's a token. It's not a coin. It's a token from Burgundy in France, from the 2 centuries ago. The Duke of Burgundy was under attack. There was a lot of turmoil in French politics, and the king was fighting the great nobility and so on was in cahoots to get rid of the king and so on. And they were going to be attacked. And he needed money to raise an army. And he appealed to people in Bali to send him money. And this was a token that they would, the king, the duke, would give people who had given him money to raise this army. And on the face of it is this disc that's holding up, that's protecting the land from forces above. There are all these arrows raining down on the land, and the land is protected by this flying disc. So it doesn't mean that they had seen a flying saucer at that time, but the idea has always been there of, disc-like objects that were not meteors, that were not, all the natural explanation, that were real discs. You find that in legends. You find that in history.
Jamie, can you see an image of this? We could show people. You found it? Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Wow.
And you see, it's protecting the land, and it's hovering in the sky, protecting it from all the thunder clouds above. Well, there were a few of those things in history, and I've collected those. I have
interpreted as a shield.
Well, it is shown as a shield, that's going to stop all those arrows.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what they used to stop arrows back then. They used a shield.
Yes.
So doesn't that just make? That doesn't seem to me to be a UFO. It seems to me to be a shield that they would protect.
Yes, but it's also, it's not exactly the shape of a shield. Most shields are, more oblong, but some of them are round. But the point is, it's hovering in the sky, protecting the land.
Okay.
And
I think some of the more compelling stuff, like the stuff in the ancient Hindu scripts, the Vimanas and all these different flying crafts that people described, that they've always been a thing that people have described.
And being able to trace it to actual investigations or actual records, because, of course, when people described something that, especially if there was some sort of being associated with it, it could be the devil, it could be that.
Right.
So they had to see a priest and confess, and they were in trouble. If you reported that thing, most of the time you'd be in trouble, because it couldn't be a normal thing. So today they just fire you from wherever you work. Because,
probably kook, and then stop you from.
They burn you alive.
And people, that's lucky. But people do have a legitimate fear of being ridiculed, and that could stop their ability to be promoted within whatever organization they're in. That you don't want to think, there's Kooky Bob over there who thinks the aliens are watching us.
The best cases I get are from executives in Silicon Valley whose family has seen something or who have seen something, and they've described, frankly, UFOs to me. And
here's another one.
Different from
so they
a year later.
So that looks way different.
That's right.
So that coin is much more compelling because that looks like something flying in the sky above the city. That doesn't look like a shield at all. And what is that peak at the bottom of it?
It's the same thing, whatever.
Yeah, that's very different.
You tell
much
that
more compelling.
Those things have been in the culture.
Yeah.
Now
but
they've sort of repressed in the culture. and the anthropologists don't want to look at that. They don't.
But it's a really old painting that, like a biblical painting of these people that look like they're flying around and like seated in these crafts.
Yes.
They're in the sky. I've never seen any sort of a conventional explanation of what is that artist depicting.
So usually the explanation when you read historians have said it's supposed to be some god or some higher level entity that's coming to protect people and so on. But when you look at the detail, I mean, it really looks like a machine. It really
Yes.
looks mechanical.
See if you can find that image, Jamie. You know the one I'm
First
talking
guess
about, right?
is this one.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
But
Thank you.
we wanted
like
to...
the one on the lower right. Well, both is that. That looks like a craft. It looks like someone seated in a craft.
It's an envoy from God or an angel who's been sent. But the problem with those is that the painting, it may relate to something that was written in the 3rd century, and the painting is a 16th century painting.
Right.
So we didn't look at that much. I mean, it's interesting from a like the one with the Virgin, with the, So it may be that the artist was witness to something, and he wanted to memorialize it, and he put it in his painting, but it tied to the time of the Virgin,
Right. They just added it in there.
We can't.
What is that supposed to be in the background?
We stayed away from that. We wanted to go to records of somebody having actually testified that he saw something or she saw something.
Right, not just artwork.
Right.
But it just is very bizarre that this artwork continually depicts people in crafts. And look, what is that thing? Flying around.
And there is a communication with the man
Who's looking up at it.
He's looking at it, and there is a sense of that he's actually seeing and having a sense of what it is.
It's like direct someone put into the painting.
So this
Very
sort of, put that in as a side. Of course, the main theme is the Virgin and the Child.
What's that one over there in the second row that says Inside Ancient? Yeah, that one. What the hell is that? That's what really freaks me out, is the paintings on cave walls that look just like grit. These bizarre paintings of things that just look like they are people wearing helmets.
And the most interesting to me come from the Sahara. I have friends who are anthropologists who worked with the UN in Africa and so on, and in part of the Sahara, and one theory they have is that the culture that eventually moved to Egypt came from the Sahara. So Sahara is just sand. Well, it's just sand today, but we know that at one time it was flourishing. There were forests, there was water. In fact, there is water, but it's underground water. It's a large amount of underground water. There was a there at one time. And so there probably was an earlier civilization, and some of those come from the Tassili. The Tassili is a region in the Sahara where there are a lot of those representations. So there were a lot of people living there at one time, and they painted that on the rocks.
See if you can find those, Jamie. Yeah, you see similar things that indigenous people in Australia have painted, similar things. It's all over the world.
Yes.
In completely separate environments, very similar features in these cave paintings.
And, I think archaeologists wouldn't disagree.
If these objects are coming from the ocean, the scale of the operation is staggering. Logistically, you would need a massive infrastructure beneath the waves. The declassified ATIP and AATIP files, 2007, 2012, confirmed videos like ****, gimbal, ****, and ****, go fast, ****, showing objects that move with zero drag and no visible means of propulsion. These ghosts don't just fly, they dive. They inhabit the parts of our planet we have yet to map.
And the opportunity that's here, and why can't we get this information out? It's real. And so rather than arguing with people about the matter, that's, for instance, why I created the Soul Foundation, which is a charitable group of academics. I started it with David Grush and Peter Skafish. Dave, of course, had to leave because he had governmental responsibilities he wanted to take care of. And actually, we've now had for 3 years in a row a symposium, first at Stanford, then at San Francisco, and the next one is now in Italy. So I'm going to plug it, sol2025.org. You can go look if you want to go to...
Sol, S-O-L?
S-O as in the sun.
2025.org.
And the purpose of that was not to advocate that any of this is real, to create an environment within which academics or professionals or just lay people interested in the subject matter could come and talk about it in a very professional manner, right? Just to bounce around ideas, not to advocate for, they're here or they're reptilians or they're this or they're that, but to, like some of the things you raised, what are the ethical issues, what are the religious issues? So we have put out a number of white papers, for instance, where we had the Catholic hierarchy write a paper on the issues related to Catholicism and religion. We've had Timothy Day, who's actually on our advisory committee, talk about USOs and those issues. We've talked about near space issues. There is running a study on experiencers. Not that the experiences are necessarily real, but what are the kinds of social matters that need to be considered for people who say that this has happened to them. So there's a group in the UK called Unhidden, which is basically a bunch of psychiatrists, a group of professional psychiatrists who say, okay, there's a trauma associated with this, whether it's real or not. No, but what are the kinds of rules that we should or provisions that we should provide to the public and psychiatrists, so when somebody shows up at your doorstep, therapy and says this, you shouldn't immediately reach for the anti-hysteria or schizophrenia drugs.
Right.
I was lucky enough in my neighborhood. Our next door neighbor, who moved in for a while, was the chair of psychiatry at Stanford, and so we go over to have dinner with her and her husband. And, like one of the first things that she says, hey, what do you do? Blah, blah, blah. And I happened to mention the UFO thing, and she just sort of sat back in her seat. Okay. But it took a year or so until she finally realized that I wasn't, and then I was approaching this from a very scientific manner. I had my beliefs as to what I think it is that I'm dealing with and that there's some sort of reality to this. But that's separate than the scientist in me that says, well, if I want to talk about this scientifically, here are the things I need to prove or disprove. So that has led, for instance, to my production or study of materials that Jalais had brought to me, some metals and other things that had chains of evidence associated with them being at some UAP or UFO landing. And so, some of these metals are very unusual. Super high purity, strange magnesium ratios, the isotope ratios are wrong, etc. Now, that's not proof of anything, but it's proof that somebody engineered them. So it's that plus the medical. Those are the kinds of reality-based tests that I can do to provide to my colleagues to say, here is and evidence. Evidence isn't proof of evidence of anything. Evidence, like in a court of law, is just evidence that you provide to the jury of peers. Right? So I sort of have gone a step further. And then I'm like, okay, well, if these things are, let's say we get advanced material, how do I prove advanced material was made by some superior intellect? Well, probably the atomic positioning of how the material is made is going to be more advanced than even our most advanced computer chip. So how do you determine that? Well, you need some sort of atomic imager that might tell you where the positions of these are and what the bond structures are. That you say, well, that's something I can measure, and I can give those results to somebody, and they can say, yeah, it's right or it's not. But at least I can say, no human, at least that I know of, could make this. So I started a company that I've raised money for with this new idea that I have for how to atomic imager, and we're doing it. And so, we've raised the money, we're building it already, and I know it will work. So when I have it, whether or not it's useful for looking at UAP materials is almost immaterial, because I know how it will be for the nanomaterials, the metamaterials, the alloys that the government, et cetera, uses for biology, et cetera. So rather than predicting what a protein structure or a DNA or a chromosome arm looks like, I'll be able to read its structure directly.
Well, I want to bring you back to you said it was 10 people that didn't have Havana syndrome, that they had some sort of an injury that was associated with a UAP event. What was their thing? Did they have an implant, or was there a...
No, some of that, like, they had what you would call white matter disease in their brain, like they had been exposed to something. So matter disease, if you have, for instance, multiple sclerosis, and you look in the brain with MRI, you'll see these white areas, which are basically dead tissue, scar tissue, things like that. One person, one of the pictures that I had was that they had claimed to have seen something in their backyard. They shone a flashlight at it, and the moment they did, they got zapped. And then you see the picture of the guy in the back of his neck, this huge welt and a bruising and a scarring. There's no reasonable way you could have gotten something like that just by exposing yourself to a flame, as a for instance, or a blowtorch. And so it's these kinds of events that, and the unfortunate issue with these is they're not repeatable. They're one-off anecdotes.
Right.
You certainly can't put a person in a place where they become bait for these kinds of events to occur. And so you're sort of...
Some people would...
Somebody might, yeah.
To go gapped. You know the Travis Walton story, right?
You know, he's kept to his story over all of the years.
That's what's so confusing.
Yeah, I mean, he's had no reason. I don't know that he's profited off of it. I find it fascinating, but it's the irreproducibility of the event that the skeptics, I call them, are pseudo-skeptics. They're pseudists, like nudists. They're pseudists that use these one-offnesses of the events to disparage the entire, of it. It sounds ridiculous. Well, of course it sounds ridiculous, because you're talking about something that is
fucking
outside
spaceship that zaps. Well, yeah, that's ridiculous.
It doesn't, and I don't think that even he would propose, Travis, that he was purposefully hurt.
Right.
I mean, if you walk across an airfield and get in the plume of a jet engine, you're going to get hurt.
Right. Yeah, and the story is that he was taken aboard to heal him.
Yeah.
That there was something happened to him during that event. But the crazy part is that all the other people that are in the truck, they witnessed it, and then they passed polygraph examinations.
Right.
They also told the same story independently when they took them and separated them. And then Travis Walton shows up 5 days later with the same clothes on.
Right.
With this crazy story.
Right. So when people say that, there's no evidence, or where's the evidence? My first question to them is, well, have you read any books about any of this? Have you spent even a moment looking into it? And, I would point them at books like Robert Powell and Michael Sword's UFOs and Government, which is not a proposal that any of this is real. It's just the story of these events over decades. And there's books like that, dozens of them, that tell the story of data and evidence. How you contextualize it is, up to your personal bias, let's say. But there's plenty of evidence. But if people haven't looked if they have an opinion about it, and they haven't looked into it, they're more like priests than they are scientists.
Yeah, it's also the public. The general public narrative is UFO equals kook.
Right.
You're a kook. You believe in that? That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
And I don't believe in anything. I believe in the data and the evidence. There's not enough evidence to tell a colleague of mine it's real.
Right.
But there's enough evidence for me to send a question worth answering.
When you were talking about
Drop your theories below. Are we looking at an undersea empire or a 70-year-old magic trick? Follow *** Skywatcher *** for the next deep dive into the oceanic underworld. The truth is out there, and it's stranger than fiction.
In Vandenberg Air Force Base in 2003, and this is not an MS, but this is about incursions over, listen to this. I promised this individual that I met at Seoul conference, witness, he's a military guy. My name is Jeffrey Nusatelli. I served 16 years in the United States Air Force as a technical sergeant and a military police officer. In October 2003, my coworkers and I witnessed this extraordinary UAP incursions at Vandenberg Air Force Base, California. The initial event is known as the Vandenberg Red Square, and it was first mentioned during the historic UAP hearing held in 2023. Case involved Boeing contractors who witnessed a huge red square-shaped object roughly the size of a football field over a missile defense system. The object was silent and had no means of propulsion. The contractors watched in amazement as the massive object slowly drifted east and vanished over the hills. I retained official Air Force records of the event, including the blotter form entry, which include the names and contact information of all the witnesses and provided it to select members of Congress, AARO, and the FBI. AARO is a new UAP task force, main anomalous resolution office. After the initial event, several other UAP incursions took place at Vandenberg. I was on duty during many of the encounters, and I investigated the incidents as they unfolded. Now remember, this is not anonymous reporting here. They include a football field-sized craft terrified security guards as it silently hovered over a facility before flying off at an unbelievable speed. A brightly illuminated silent object that landed on the base flight line before accelerating instantaneously and disappearing into space. A huge triangular-shaped, larger than a C-130, that hovered 50 feet over a police officer before it drifted slowly over the base. A blue liquid orb, roughly the size of his house, that hovered on the base. The objects made no sound and had zero obvious means of propulsion. And my experiences with UAP were awe-inspiring, exciting, and terrifying. I don't know why UAP are flying over our bases and our neighborhood, but I do know the UAP phenomenon is of the utmost importance to all of humanity. I currently have 5 other military witnesses to the Vandenberg incursions that are all willing to testify tomorrow under oath that these statements are true. We need answers to this mystery and better government transparency. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story. Former United States Air Force Sergeant and witness Jeff Nusatelli.
Well,
I mean, we're talking objects the size of a football field?
That's bananas. And they take off insanely fast, just like the Tic Tac.
Straight up space.
So this was it. What was the exact date of this?
This was 2003. A number of incursions during the year, up all the way into 2005. And he has the names, and they submitted it to the new head of AARO.
That's it, because that coincides with the Tic Tac.
It does coincide with the Tic Tac.
I wonder if there's vacation season. It's like every few years.
Let's go check out what those guys are up to.
You know what I mean? Maybe it's like a real pain in the ass to get here. Maybe it's one of those things like you can go to Australia, but it's a pain in the ass. It's 16 fucking hours on a plane. It's a long flight.
Oh my gosh.
You know
I went to South Africa one time and that was like 20 hours. Yeah. I was like, this plane's going to run out of gas.
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's like one of those things. It's like you can do it, but it's a pain in the ass. So maybe they only travel to Earth every now and again.
How these incursions have been taking place, and here we are 20 years later, and we're only now really starting to talk about them.
I think the reason being is if you don't understand it and you can't protect people from it because it's so beyond our capabilities that if just describing it accurately removes all confidence that our government has everything under control. That's one reason why. And also, if you have no answers, you don't know what the hell it is.
That's a very good point, yes.
If you don't know what the hell it is, what are you even going to say? Hey, there's something that came. We don't know what the fuck it is. It's as big as a football field. Yeah. Shot off into the sky. We have no idea. They'd be like, what do you mean we have no idea?
Yep.
Hire someone who understands this. And then they'd be like, fire him. Get him out of office.
I remember 20 years ago, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, totally naive, still naive, but I was meeting with a general, and I said, God, it would be so amazing. This story is so unifying, and we have this kumbaya moment, and we discover that, we're not alone in the universe, and wouldn't that be amazing, and blah, 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 the implications for all of humanity. And he sat there almost chuckling at me. And he looked at me and he goes, you got it all wrong, man. You got to see this through our lens. And I was like, through your lens? He goes, yeah, the military perspective. I was like, okay, tell me. And I never thought about this before. You mentioned it. He goes, okay, imagine this scenario. We sit there and we say, my fellow Americans, it has been brought to our attention that there are craft of unknown origin whizzing around in our airspace. They exhibit a technology that's light years advanced anything that we have. We don't know who they are, where they come from, what they want. Shall they turn to be hostile? We have no visible means of defense against them. Thank you and good night.
Fired.
You're fired.
And someone like Trump along, make a deal with the aliens.
Yeah, but that predicament,
Yeah.
like people always go, why the secrecy? Duh.
Have secrecy because you got to imagine the job of a politician in general, right? Like you have to pretend that you're going to be able to handle situations that you well know you're not going to be able to handle.
Yeah.
You know, if you're running for president, you know that you're not going to fix this economy. All right, stop. Just stop.
Everything's going to wave the magic wand and it's all going to be taken care
You
of.
know you can implement electric cars over the. Stop. Stop. Shut the fuck up. There's not enough batteries. So if you're lying about all that, you're probably going to lie about whether or not you can handle the alien threat. I will unite us. I will unite us as a planet so we can deal together with the aliens.
Yeah. Let's do
That's all
it.
you'd have to do is just say some bullshit like
And then
that.
someone ends his ear when he gets into office and is like, yeah.
A good speech,
Sure.
J.D. Vance, like a guy.
A pristine craft, doors wide open, and nobody home. Is this a gift from the stars or a massive government psyop? The truth is lurking beneath the waves. If the donations theory is true, we have to ask, what do they want in return? Is the U.S. government hiding these crafts in plain sight, or are they struggling to understand a technology that was never meant for us?
Liar like that. He's going to tell a lot of lies.
Right.
It's not going to be just one lie from '89.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That you basically say the same version of forever.
Yeah. The other weird thing in that story is in Messengers of Deception, Jalai's book, he talks about, because he's not a believer in Lazar, talks about Lazar being forced to drink a liquid. And Lazar even talks about this openly, that he was forced to drink a liquid and it's like pine or something. And it causes memory lapses in cases. So that's also a weird factor. But there is so much, I think, my buddy Luigi, I also have a good friend named Chris Ram, who has an amazing UFO channel called Area 52. And he's met Lazar through Luigi. And I don't want to blow up their spot, giving me a lot of ammo as far as just Lazar being at Area 51 S4. And so it's so fascinating.
So they give him this liquid to kill his memory? That's the idea behind it?
I don't know the intent. It was just drink this or whatever. And then he said that it caused, at least in the Valet readout, he says that it caused lapses. It's the quote in Messengers of Deception. This is where it gets so confusing. MK Ultra was super widespread. It was all deleted, the church committee or whatever. But like it was a very widespread program. It would be one of the number one use cases where you'd use MK Ultra. It wouldn't necessarily be to trick somebody into saying that they saw a flying saucer. It would be around the flying saucer program to fuck with the person's memory so that they couldn't read certain things out.
Right.
So it's just this, again, it's hard to say.
Well, there's some weird stuff like the large folder that was on religion.
Yes.
Like how much of that is just misinformation?
I think a lot of that was passage material because it's similar to
passage material. What does that mean?
It's basically stuff into somebody where it's like certain provably false things. You can track where the provably false stuff goes or whatever. It's also a lit test to see if they'll believe it. It's like spooky intel shit. And in 79, there's a guy named Rick Doty who drives a guy named Paul Benowitz insane, basically. He views this vertically taking off and landing exotic craft at Kirtland Air Force Base, where there are a lot of interesting things, seen. And he is shown similar things along with Linda Moulton Howe is taken in front of a two-way mirror, and Rick Doty, this Air Force Office of Special Operations agent, who we know is acting in bad faith at that time, he's even come out and admitted this, shows her this thing called Project Garnet, is oddly similar around accelerated evolution to the stuff that they showed Lazar. Also, if you have a UFO program that's extremely compartmentalized, why at the same time give the person this like ontological model of reality while you're compartmentalizing? That doesn't make sense. So, and this is what I love about Lazar. Lazar will admit that he's like, I think a lot of that stuff could have been fake and bullshit. And I only am what I saw with regards to the craft. And I don't take any of that stuff fully at face value. So there's Project Galileo, there's Looking Glass, there are these projects that were super interesting and spooky, and I think worthy of engagement with, like all these weird limited hangouts are. But
do any of these people that supposedly had contact with extraterrestrial entities or interdimensional or whatever they are, do any of these people recall a conversation where they warn us about AI.
That's a great question.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. It's almost all nuclear.
That seems crazy. That seems crazy. That there's no discussion about you are on the verge of something truly spectacular.
Maybe AI or control system.
Maybe they are AI.
Maybe they are AI.
Maybe AI becomes that. Maybe biological limitations need to be traversed, and the best way to traverse them is to eliminate biology.
We are now experimenting with computational biology. You can use things like this neuroscientist Carl Friston, the free energy principle. There's this company called Cortical Labs, and I think they might play up some of their results, but they use these microelectric plate arrays, and they program like cultured rat neurons to do basic computational tasks. And so like if that's the super base level, right? Like we're just creating the like transistors for this like new model of computation. But if you go way out into the future, you have anatomical compilers, 3D printers of bodies, and you know, these things could be drone avatars. That's why we're like, why do they crash? This could be their Earth homeostasis kit that they've deployed. They're just von Neumann replicator probes meant to, you know, oversee the Earth. And, you know, a little node lights up when we create nuclear or like an AI thing or like...
Well, it's all like Pasulka, you know, Diana Pasulka,
Oh, yeah.
she thinks they're donations.
That he says, they're called donation sites, and
like which is like one accelerated evolution. Like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you guys made this? Just leave the wheel, you know.
Let's look over here.
Leave this, leave that. It kind of, I mean, that's the way to get someone to think outside the box.
Plant the seed.
Yeah,
You
you don't want to wait for these morons to figure out how to make this.
If you technological evolution in North Sentinel Island, which has no contact with humans, what would you might just airdrop a computer, figure it out, you know? They'd be like, a computer, this
I'd
is
start
great.
with a lighter.
Sure.
I don't think they have fire.
Yeah, computer a little advanced.
But you would give them some stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. And let them figure out how to make that stuff and give them the raw materials to make that stuff.
Totally.
Especially if you have some complex alloy, like this bismuth, whatever the hell it is, with layered, like, find that, figure that out.
Yeah.
Can you make it? Like,
Yeah.
You get your best scientists and you compartmentalize it. You do it over decades because you really can't open it up. And this is one of the things that Lazar said that he had deep frustration about while working at S4 is that you can't do science like that where everything's compartmentalized. You need to be able to open it up to collaboration. And you couldn't collaborate. You weren't allowed to.
Yep.
So it's like, we're not going to get anywhere. Okay, we're going to bring in new people. You know, we're going to bring in a new guy, see if this new genius can, hey, what do you think of this? Like, what is it? You tell me.
That could be a part of what's happening with disclosure, where if you have Cold War era secrecy, it's like if we're ahead of Russia and China, clamp down. We like can't let them know anything.
Right.
But then all of a sudden they play catch up. And then all of a sudden maybe you have this archaic cargo cult system that doesn't work anymore, void FOIA requests, where you have restricted data covering, you know, material found by specific aerospace corporations that aren't even our best and brightest when it comes to our defense primes or whatever.
Right.
And you're at the top of the national security pie, and you're like, holy shit, like we need to update this stuff. So we need to broaden the surface area without giving away the crown jewels. We need some disclosure on these things. You can't, it is maladaptive from a national security standpoint to have some STEM in Kentucky who's a prodigy to not even think this shit is real.
Right. And then you're dealing with China where they've got it completely opened up and they're like, make this.
Completely open. And like, I don't know if you've read, there's a great Chinese science fiction novel called The Three Body Problem.
Great.
And the CCP will show up at your door and say, come work for us. You are working here. And that's not really the way we do things. So the way we do things is like, you get the stuff out in these kind of partial limited hangouts thing. You go compete, like just like the AI stuff.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And it's like, see what happens.
Over there, if you leak it, they'll just fucking kill you.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to leak it.
No. Yeah.
It's to me the question of civilization.
A craft with not a scratch, doors wide open, but nobody home. Is this a gift from the stars or a psychological trap? Does the truth lie deep in the ocean or inside top secret vaults? Drop your thoughts below and follow to decode the next mystery.